The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as my fingers moved across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled by on my monitor, but my mind was not fully focused. A nagging feeling had been bothering me all day, and I couldn't shake it off. I glanced at the clock on my desk. It was 9:37 p.m. It was Friday night. I should have been home hours ago, but the project deadline was approaching, and I needed to complete it. Still, something seemed off. I reached for my phone and paused briefly before dialing our home number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Right as I was about to hang up, someone responded, "Hello." The voice was not Emily's. It was deep, slurred, and clearly male. My heart rate immediately doubled. "Who is this?" I demanded, gripping the phone firmly. A low chuckle came from the speaker. "Your wife is entertaining me," he replied. The line went dead. For a moment, I sat there frozen in disbelief. Then, like a dam bursting, a flood of emotions rushed through me. Anger, fear, confusion, and betrayal all battled for dominance. I jumped up and nearly knocked over my chair. Grabbing my coat, I dashed out of the office, barely remembering to lock the door behind me. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced, replaying recent events and looking for clues I might have overlooked. Emily had been distant lately, frequently arriving home late from work. There were unexplained charges on her credit card. We had been arguing more frequently about trivial matters. How could I have been so blind? I muttered, slamming my hand against the steering wheel. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in the street. My stomach churned. Part of me wanted to turn back and drive away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But I needed to know the truth. I got out of the car, my legs feeling like lead as I walked to the front door. My hand shook as I put the key into the lock. I took a deep breath, turned the key, and pushed open the door. The house was too quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as I walked upstairs. As I approached our bedroom, I noticed muffled voices and movement. Without hesitation, I threw open the door. The sight that greeted me would be forever etched in my memory. Emily, my wife of 5 years, was sharing our bed with another man. Not just any man, her boss, Brad Hastings. For a moment, time appeared to stand still. Emily's eyes widened with shock and horror. Brad seemed more annoyed than anything else. "Ryan," Emily gasped, clutching the sheets to her chest. I can explain." I couldn't speak. My throat felt as though it was closing up. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began recording. "What the hell are you doing?" Brad growled, scrambling for his clothes. "Get out." I finally spoke, my voice low and dangerous. "Both of you, get out of my house." Emily started crying. "Ryan, let me explain." "It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Not what I think. I come home to find my wife in bed with another man. And it's not what I think. Save your excuses, Emily. Just get out." Brad, now partially dressed, attempted to approach me. "Look, Mitchell, let's talk about this like adults." I took a step back and kept my phone trained on them. "There is nothing to talk about. Get out before I call the police." Emily stumbled out of bed, tears running down her cheeks. "Ryan, please. I love you. We can work this out." Her words only made me angrier. "Love me? Is this how you express love, Emily? By sleeping with your boss in our bed? Get out." As they hurriedly dressed and collected their belongings, I continued recording. Part of me knew I was acting out of pure emotion, but I couldn't control myself. I wanted them to feel the humiliation I was feeling. After they were dressed, I followed them downstairs, still recording. Emily made one last attempt to communicate with me. "Ryan, I'm deeply sorry. Please, can we just talk about it?" I shook my head, my voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "How could you do this to us? What about our marriage? Just go, Emily. I can't even look at you right now." As soon as they left, I slammed the door shut and locked it. Then, without really considering the consequences, I shared the video on social media. I sank into the couch, head in my hands. The reality of what had just occurred began to set in. My marriage, my life as I knew it, had ended, and I had no idea what to do next. My phone began buzzing incessantly. Messages from friends and family who had seen the video. Some expressed shock and sympathy. Others were angry on my behalf. However, I couldn't bring myself to respond to any of them. As the night progressed, I sat in the dark, replaying every moment of my relationship with Emily, trying to figure out where it went wrong. How had we gone from a happy marriage to this? The betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound that I didn't think would ever heal. The next morning, I awoke on the sofa, my neck stiff and my head pounding. For a blissful moment, I assumed it had all been a terrible nightmare. Then, reality struck back, and the pain hit me all over again. I checked my phone. The video had gone viral overnight. There were numerous comments, messages, and missed calls. I scrolled through them indifferently, not taking anything in. A loud bang on the door startled me. I stood up slowly, my body protesting every move. When I opened the door, Emily was standing there, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Ryan," she said, her voice hoarse, "we need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. "I believe you said enough last night, Emily." She flinched at my words but continued, "Please, let me explain. I never intended for this to happen." Against my better judgment, I moved aside to let her in. As she walked past me, I caught a whiff of her perfume. I used to find this scent intoxicating. Now, it just made me feel sick. We sat at opposite ends of the couch. The distance between us felt like an unbridgeable chasm. Emily took a deep breath. "Ryan, I'm deeply sorry. What I did was unacceptable. I know that, but you need to believe me. I never intended to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "Nobody ever wants to hurt me. How did you think sleeping with your boss would make me feel?" She flinched again. "It wasn't like that. Brad, he promised me a promotion. He said it would help our future. I thought I was doing it for us." My anger, simmering beneath the surface, erupted. "For us? Are you kidding, Emily? How could doing this help us?" "I know it sounds crazy," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "But things have been tight lately with the mortgage and student loans. I figured if I got the promotion, we'd finally be able to start saving for a family." I stood up and paced the room. "So instead of discussing our financial concerns, you compromise yourself for your boss. Is that what our marriage means to you?" Emily gasped, pain flashing across her face. "That's not fair, Ryan. I made a horrible mistake. I know that, but I love you. We can work through this." I stopped pacing and looked at her, really looked at her. I no longer recognized the woman sitting on my couch. "No, Emily, we can't. You betrayed me in the worst way. There's no going back from that." "Ryan, please," she begged, reaching out to me. "Don't throw away 5 years of marriage over one mistake." I took a step back, avoiding her touch. "One mistake. This wasn't a one-night stand. Emily, you've been lying to me for weeks, maybe even months. How long has it been going on?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "A few months," she whispered. The admission felt like a physical blow. "Months," I said, my voice hollow. "And you never considered coming clean. You never thought about how this would destroy me." "I wanted to tell you," she explained, "but I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of destroying everything we built together." I shook my head, feeling a strange calm wash over me. "Well, congratulations, Emily. You've done exactly what you were afraid of. It's over." Her eyes widened with panic. "No, Ryan, please. We can seek counseling. I'll quit my job, cut all ties with Brad. Please, give me another chance." "Another chance? For what? To lie to me? To cheat on me again? No, Emily. I'm done. I want a divorce." The word lingered in the air between us, heavy and final. Emily broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "Ryan, I'm begging you. Don't do this. I love you. I'll do anything to make things right." For a brief moment, I felt my resolve waver. A part of me wanted to comfort her, to hold her and pretend we could return to the way things were. But I knew we couldn't. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. "I think you should leave," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'll have my lawyer contact you regarding the divorce proceedings." She stood up, her legs trembling. "This can't be how it ends, Ryan. Please, think about it. Take some time." I walked to the door and opened it. "Goodbye, Emily." As she walked past me, she paused. "I truly am sorry, Ryan. I hope one day you'll forgive me." I didn't respond. I simply closed the door behind her and leaned against it as her footsteps faded away. The house felt emptier than ever. I looked around at the life we had created together. The photos on the walls, the little knickknacks we had accumulated over time. Everything seemed to belong to someone else now. My phone vibrated again. It was a message from Brad. "Delete that video right away, or you'll regret it." I stared at the message, feeling a new wave of anger wash over me. Who did he think he was to threaten me? I typed a reply. "Go to hell, Brad. You reap what you sow." I hit the send button, and then blocked his number. I knew it wasn't over, that there would be consequences to my actions, but at the time, I didn't care. Let him make every effort. I had nothing more to lose. The following week passed in a blur. I filed for divorce, hoping to avoid dealing with the emotional fallout. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah, warned me that things could get messy. "Are you certain you want to go through with this?" she asked during our first meeting. "Infidelity can sometimes be resolved between couples." I shook my head firmly. "No, there is no going back. I want to get this over with as soon as possible." Sarah nodded and made a note in her file. "All right, but you should know about the video you posted. It could complicate matters. Mr. Hastings might use it against you." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a headache develop. Let him try. I'm not taking it down. As I exited Sarah's office, my phone rang. It was a message from my boss, Dave Coleman. "I need to see you in my office right away." A feeling of dread settled in my stomach. I'd been so preoccupied with my personal life that I hadn't thought about how this might affect my work. I went straight to the office, trying to prepare for whatever was coming. Dave was waiting for me when I arrived, his face grim. He motioned for me to take a seat. "Ryan," he began, cautiously neutral, "I'm sure you understand why I called you in." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Dave sighed and ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, I'm not here to judge your personal life, but I did see the video you posted. It's causing issues for the company." "Problems?" I echoed, feeling the surge of anger. I was betrayed, and now I'm causing problems. "I understand you're upset," Dave said, raising a hand. "However, we have a reputation to maintain. Clients are asking questions. It isn't good for business." I leaned forward, gripping the chair's arms. "So, Dave, what are you saying?" He refused to meet my gaze. "I apologize, Ryan, but we'll have to let you go." For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. "Are you firing me because my wife cheated on me?" Dave slid a document across his desk. "Your contract allows for termination without cause. I'll offer a severance package, of course." I stared at the paper, feeling like I was in a twisted nightmare. "This is nonsense, Dave. I've dedicated 5 years to this company. My work has always been exceptional." "I know, Ryan, and I sincerely apologize. But the decision has been made. You can clean up your desk now or return after hours, whichever you prefer." I got up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I'll do it now." I didn't want to cause any more problems for the company. As I packed my belongings, my coworkers avoided eye contact and whispered amongst themselves. I felt like a pariah, branded by my own pain and anger. As I prepared to leave, Brad Hastings appeared at the doorway of my former office. He leaned against the frame with a smug expression on his face. "I warned you you'd regret it," he said, his voice so low that only I could hear. Something inside me snapped. Before I realized what I was doing, my fist hit his face. Brad stumbled backward, blood spurting from his nose. "You son of a—" I yelled, lunging for him again, but security had already arrived, grabbing my arms and pulling me back. Brad wiped the blood from his face, and his smug smile turned into a furious snarl. "You're done, Mitchell," he spat. "I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." As security led me out of the building, I could feel everyone's eyes on me. My coworkers, people I had considered friends, watching in stunned silence as I was led to the exit. Once outside, one of the security guards, Mike, whom I had always been friendly with, gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry, man. For what it's worth, I believe you got a raw deal." I nodded, unable to respond. I watched as they carried my belongings to the car. As I drove away from the office for the last time, I felt as if I was watching someone else's life unravel in a matter of days. I felt the full weight of what had happened over the previous week. I'd lost my wife, my job, and my dignity. I pulled over on the side of the road, unable to see through the tears that finally flowed. I let out a primal scream of rage and pain, pounding my fists on the steering wheel until they ached. When I ran out of tears, I sat there, staring blankly at the road ahead. I had no idea what to do next or how to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. But one thing was certain: this wasn't over. Brad Hastings and Emily had taken everything from me, and I was going to make them pay for it. The days after my firing blurred together. I spent most of my time holed up in my apartment, blinds drawn, ignoring calls from concerned friends and family. The humiliation of losing everything burned like acid in my stomach. One morning, while scrolling mindlessly through social media, I came across a post that piqued my interest. It was a photograph of Brad Hastings at a charitable event, his arm wrapped around a petted blonde woman. The caption identified her as Jessica Hastings, his wife. I looked at the image, studying Jessica's expression. Her smile appeared forced, her eyes tired and sad. Something about her expression struck a chord with me, and before I could talk myself out of it, I messaged her. "Hello, Jessica. You don't know who I am, but my name is Ryan Mitchell. I think we should talk about your husband." To my surprise, she replied almost immediately. "Ryan, I know who you are. I've seen the video. What do you want?" I took a deep breath and typed, "To tell you the truth and hopefully get some answers, can we meet?" There was a long pause before her reply arrived. "Okay, tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Café Noir, 5th Street. I can't stay long." The following day, I arrived at the cafe early, my stomach in knots. I hadn't showered or shaved in days, and I was sure I looked as bad as I felt. But I didn't care. This wasn't about me. Jessica walked in precisely at 2 p.m. She was even more stunning in person. Up close, I could see the shadows under her eyes, carefully concealed with makeup. She slid into the seat across from mine, her movements tense. "You have 15 minutes, Mr. Mitchell. Make them count." I nodded, gathering my thoughts. "First, I'd like to apologize. I understand that my actions probably made things difficult for you." Jessica's laughter was bitter. "Difficult? That's one word for it. Do you know what it's like to have your husband's affair exposed all over the internet?" I grimaced. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wanted to hurt them the way they hurt me." Her expression softened slightly. "I understand how you feel. But why did you want to meet me?" I leaned forward and lowered my voice. "Because I believe there's more going on here than just an affair. Brad, he's not a good man, is he?" Jessica's eyes widened before darting around the cafe. "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Jessica," I spoke gently, "I've seen how you look in photos with him, like you're checking to see if anyone's listening. You're afraid of him, aren't you?" Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand. I can't talk about this." I reached out, stopping just short of touching her hand. You can. I want to help you. She shook her head furiously. You can't help me. No one can. If I leave him, he'll take everything. My home, my money, my children. Isn't he abusive? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jessica's silence spoke volumes. Listen to me, I said, my voice firm but friendly. You don't have to live like this. There are people who can help. I know a lawyer. A lawyer? Jessica interrupted, her voice rising. Do you think I haven't thought of that? Brad owns half the lawyers in the city. The other half are too afraid to confront him. I nodded, understanding her fear. I know someone who isn't from around here, someone who isn't afraid of Brad. We can do this together, Jessica. We can bring him down. She looked at me, hope and fear mingling in her eyes. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because it's the right thing to do, I replied simply. And Brad has to pay for what he's done to both of us. Jessica was silent for a long time. Then she took a deep breath. Okay, tell me about this attorney. I smiled for the first time in what felt like ages. His name is Ethan Roberts. He's an old college friend. If anyone can help us, it's him. And you trust him? Jessica asked, still hesitant. With my life, I assured her. He's the best there is. Jessica nodded slowly. All right, I'll meet with him. But Ryan, make me a promise. Anything, I said. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll help me protect my children. They're all I have left. I met her gaze, recognizing the fierce love of a mother in her eyes. I promise, Jessica, we're in this together now. We'll make sure you and your children are safe. Jessica left the cafe, and I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. For the first time since that fateful night, I had a purpose, a reason to continue fighting. I took out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It was time to catch up with an old friend. The phone rang several times before a familiar voice answered. Ethan Roberts speaking. I paused for a moment, unsure of myself. Ethan, it's Ryan. Ryan Mitchell. There was a prolonged pause on the other end. Ryan. Well, this is unexpected. It's been, 10 years? Yeah, about that, I explained, running a hand through my hair. Listen, I know we didn't part on good terms, but I need your help. Ethan's voice became cold. Can I help? That's a big request, considering the last time we spoke. You made it clear you didn't want anything to do with me. I understand, and I'm sorry. I was young and stupid. But this isn't about me, Ethan. There are people who need your help, innocent people. Why should I care? Ethan asked, though I could detect a hint of curiosity in his voice. Because you're still the same guy who wanted to change the world, right? The guy who went to law school to fight for the underdog. There was another pause, then Ethan exhaled. All right. I'm listening, but this better be good, Mitchell. I took a deep breath and laid everything out. The affair, the video, losing my job. Then I told him about Jessica and Brad, the abuse, the fear. When I finished, Ethan was silent for a long time. Jesus, Ryan, you really stepped in it this time, didn't you? Yeah, I suppose I did, I admitted. So, will you help me? Meet me at my office tomorrow at 9 a.m., Ethan replied, his tone sharp. And Ryan, don't be late. The next morning, I found myself standing outside a modern office building in downtown Austin. Ethan's name was on the directory, and his firm occupied the entire top floor. My stomach churned with nerves as I rode the elevator up. The last time I saw Ethan, we had almost fought over a girl, Emily. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ethan's receptionist, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, eyed me suspiciously. Mr. Roberts is expecting you. Go right in. I pushed open the heavy oak door and entered Ethan's office. He was standing near the window, his back to me. He had filled out since college, and his tailored suit made his lean frame look solid and imposing. You're on time, Ethan said, turning to face me. That's new. I managed a weak smile. People change. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Do they? Because from where I stand, you look like the same reckless hothead who stole my girlfriend and ruined our friendship. I flinched at his words. That's not fair, Ethan. Emily and I. It wasn't like that. Oh, really? Ethan laughed bitterly. So tell me, Ryan, what was it like? Enlighten me. We fell in love, I replied quietly. It wasn't planned. It just happened. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, Ethan snapped. And now you're asking for my help because the same woman cheated on you. Isn't karma? His words stung, but I couldn't argue. He was right. I deserved that, and probably more. Ethan, this isn't about me or Emily. It's about Jessica Hastings and her children. They need your help. Ethan's expression softened slightly. Tell me everything. I mean everything, Ryan. For the next hour, I recounted the entire sordid story. Ethan listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Mitchell, you've gotten yourself into a really bad situation. I nodded, feeling the weight of everything bear down on me. I know, but I can't walk away. Not when I know what Brad is doing to Jessica and the kids. Ethan remained quiet for a long time, studying me. Then he exhaled. All right, I'll help, but not for you, Ryan. For Jessica and her kids. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Ethan. Don't thank me yet. He raised a hand. This won't be easy. Brad Hastings has money and connections. We'll need more than just your word and Jessica's testimony. I nodded. What do you suggest? Ethan tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking. We need hard evidence, financial records, witness statements, anything that shows a pattern of abuse or misconduct. And we'll need someone who can dig up dirt without getting caught. A private investigator? I asked. Ethan nodded. Exactly. I know someone who could help. Her name is Mia Lewis, an ex-cop turned private investigator. She's the best in the industry. Can we trust her? I asked. Ethan smiled. Mia is as straight as they come, and she has a particular dislike for men who abuse their power. I felt a glimmer of hope. Okay, let's do this. As I stood to leave, Ethan called out, Ryan. I turned back. Yeah. His expression was unreadable. For whatever it's worth, I'm sorry about Emily. No one deserves that kind of betrayal. I swallowed hard, fighting back the emotions his words evoked. Thanks, Ethan, and I'm sorry for everything, too. He nodded, a ghost of a smile on his face. I know. Now let's go make that guy pay. I left Ethan's office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. We had a plan, we had hope, and just maybe, I had my old friend back. The following few weeks were a blur of activity. Ethan introduced me to Mia Lewis, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper wit. So you're the one who caused trouble, she mentioned when we first met, sizing me up. I hope you're ready for what comes next. I nodded, attempting to convey more confidence than I felt. Whatever it takes to bring Brad down. Mia's smile was predatory. That's what I like to hear. Now, let's get to work. We created a makeshift command center in a rented office space. Ethan handled the legal strategy while Mia and I focused on gathering evidence. One afternoon, as I was poring over financial records that Mia had somehow obtained, she burst into the room, her eyes gleaming with excitement. I have something, she announced. 2 of Brad's former employees are willing to talk. They have stories that will make your hair curl. I leaped to my feet. That's great. When can we meet them? Mia raised a hand. Not so fast, hotshot. These individuals are scared. They're taking a significant risk by coming forward. This needs to be handled carefully. Ethan, who had been on the phone in the corner, hung up and joined us. Mia's right. We need to ensure these witnesses are protected. If Brad finds out, he could ruin their lives. I nodded, chastised. You're right. So, what's the plan? Ethan thought for a moment. We'll schedule a meeting somewhere neutral. I'll have a court reporter there to record official statements. Mia, could you please arrange security? She nodded. Already working on it. I've got a couple of former military buddies who owe me a favor. As they worked out the details, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. We were making progress, but each step felt like poking a sleeping bear. The day of the meeting came. We met in a small conference room at a rundown office building on the outskirts of town. Mia's security team scoured the premises for bugs before giving us the all-clear. The first witness, a woman named Sarah, appeared nervous but determined. I worked as Brad's assistant for 3 years. She began with a shaky voice. At first it was just inappropriate comments, standing too close. However, as Sarah recounted her experiences, the situation escalated. I felt sick to my stomach as she described Brad as a monster. The second witness, a man named Tom, told a different but equally damning story about how Brad used his power and position to terrorize his employees. Brad asked me to doctor financial reports, he said, his face pale. He was embezzling money from the company and transferring it to offshore accounts. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze intense. Do you have proof of this? Tom nodded, pulling out a USB drive. Everything's on here. I kept copies as insurance. The court reporter dutifully recorded their statements. I experienced a surge of hope. This was it. We had the evidence we needed to bring Brad down. But my joy was short-lived. As we were finishing up the meeting, Mia's phone vibrated. Her face went pale as she read the message. We have a problem, she said, her voice strained. One of my contacts just saw Brad enter the building. Panic spread throughout the room. Ethan sprang into action. Mia, get Sarah and Tom out the back way. Ryan, you're with me. We'll create a distraction. Mia hustled our witnesses out. Ethan and I headed for the lobby. Brad's voice was loud and angry as he demanded to know where we were. Ethan squeezed my shoulder. Be ready for this. I took a deep breath, as ready as I'd ever be. We entered the lobby just as Brad was about to push past the security guard. His face contorted with rage when he saw us. You, he snarled, lunging toward me. Do you think you can destroy my life without consequences? Ethan stepped between us, his voice calm yet firm. Mr. Hastings, I suggest you leave right now, unless you want to add assault to your list of charges. Brad's eyes widened. Charges? What the hell are you talking about? I couldn't help but smirk. It's over, Brad. We know everything. The abuse, the embezzlement. It's all coming out. For a moment, I thought Brad was going to attack us, but something in his eyes changed. Anger gave way to fear. This isn't over, he hissed, backing away. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Brad stormed out, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Ethan clapped my back. Nice work, partner. But the real fight is just beginning. We returned to our office and regrouped. Sarah and Tom were safely away, and their statements were secure. We had financial records, witness testimony, and an increasing amount of evidence against Brad. As we sat around the table, exhausted but exhilarated, I looked at my unlikely teammates. Mia, Ethan, the tough-as-nails detective, and Jessica and her children were counting on us to deliver justice. So, what happens next? I asked. Ethan's smile was grim but determined. Now we prepare for war. The day of the trial arrived, bringing with it a mix of excitement and fear. As I adjusted my tie in the courthouse bathroom mirror, Ethan appeared behind me. Are you ready for this? He asked, his gaze meeting mine in the reflection. I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. Do you think we have a shot? Ethan's expression was grim but resolute. We have a solid case, but Brad's team is formidable. This is going to be a fight. We made our way into the courtroom, where Jessica was already waiting, her hands twisted nervously in her lap. I sat down next to her and gave her a reassuring nod. You've got this, I whispered. Just tell the truth. The bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Michaels presiding. As we stood, I saw Brad and his legal team. Brad's face was a mask of calm confidence, but I could see the tension in his jaw. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, surveyed the courtroom. You may be seated. Mr. Roberts, you may begin your opening statement. Ethan stood, buttoning his jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're here today to expose a pattern of personal and professional abuse committed by Brad Hastings. As Ethan presented our case, I observed the jurors' reactions. Some looked shocked. Others were skeptical. Brad's attorney, Gerald Thompson, a shark-like man, scribbled notes furiously. When it was Thompson's turn, he painted a drastically different picture. The defense will demonstrate that these allegations are nothing more than a vindictive attempt at character assassination, orchestrated by a disgruntled ex-employee and a wife seeking a large payout in divorce court. Battle lines were drawn as the trial progressed. Witnesses were called. I was among the first to take the stand. Thompson's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Mitchell, isn't it true that you assaulted Mr. Hastings outside your former workplace? I gritted my teeth. Yes, but... A simple yes or no is sufficient. Thompson interrupted. Isn't it also true that you posted a video online of Mr. Hastings in a compromising position without his permission? Yes, but the video showed. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. No more questions. As I stepped down, feeling defeated, Ethan caught my gaze and gave me a subtle nod. He had a plan. Jessica was next. She took a shaky breath as she was sworn in. Mrs. Hastings, Ethan began gently, can you tell the court about your relationship with your husband? Jessica's voice was quiet yet steady. At first, everything was fine. Brad could be charming when he wanted to. But over time, things changed. How so? Ethan asked. He became controlling, angry. If dinner wasn't ready on time, or if I spoke to another man, even politely, he'd become enraged. Has he ever hit you? Ethan inquired. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Yes. The first time was about a year into our marriage. He apologized afterward and promised it would never happen again, but it did, again and again. Thompson objected, arguing that Jessica's testimony was prejudicial, but the judge overruled him. Jessica recounted years of abuse. I noticed several jurors wiping away tears. Even the judge's stern expression softened. When it was Thompson's turn to cross-examine, he went for the throat. Mrs. Hastings, if your husband was so abusive, why didn't you leave? Jessica's voice quivered. I was afraid. Brad always threatened to take the kids if I left, claiming that he'd ruin me. I believed him. So you stayed because of the money? Thompson pressed. Objection. Ethan shouted, harassing the witness. Sustained, the judge said sharply. Mr. Thompson, exercise caution. The following days were a blur of testimony. Maya took the stand and presented the financial evidence she had uncovered. Brad's former employees told their stories of harassment and unethical business practices. Finally, it was Brad's turn to testify. He cut an imposing figure on the stand, his expensive suit and confident demeanor standing in stark contrast to Jessica's quiet dignity. Mr. Hastings, Thompson began, how do you respond to these allegations? Brad's voice was smooth as oil. Their statements are completely false. I've always treated my wife and employees with respect. This is nothing but a plot to ruin me, led by a man who couldn't accept that his wife preferred me. I felt my face flush with rage, but Ethan's hand on my arm kept me in my seat. Ethan was relentless during his cross-examination. Mr. Hastings, could you please explain the bank transfers to offshore accounts? Brad's cool facade cracked slightly. These were legitimate business transactions. Really? Because our financial expert believes they're textbook examples of embezzlement. As Ethan systematically dismantled Brad's defenses, I noticed the jury leaning forward, hanging on every word. Brad's responses became increasingly confused and contradictory. Finally, Ethan made his move. Your Honor, I would like to present Exhibit C, a video recording as evidence. Brad's face went pale. Objection. Thompson shouted. This is the illegal video that Mr. Mitchell took. The judge looked over her glasses. Is that true, Mr. Roberts? Ethan smiled. No, Your Honor. This is security camera footage from Mr. Hastings' office, showing him physically assaulting a female employee. We obtained it through legal means during discovery. Brad's expression crumbled as the damning footage played. He realized it was over. Ethan delivered an eloquent and passionate closing argument. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have heard overwhelming evidence of Mr. Hastings' pattern of abuse, both personally and professionally. It's time to hold him accountable. Thompson's closing seemed weak in comparison, full of deflection and attempts to discredit witnesses. As the jury began to deliberate, Ethan turned to face me and Jessica. Now, we wait. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When we returned to the courtroom, my heart pounded so hard I could barely hear the judge ask for the verdict. The foreman spoke. On the charge of domestic abuse, we find Brad Hastings guilty. On the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. Jessica burst into tears beside me, and I felt my own eyes well up. The judge's voice cut through the confusion. Mr. Hastings, please rise for sentencing. Brad stood, his face ashen. Bradley Hastings, this court sentences you to 5 years in prison for embezzlement. In addition, you will pay your company $2.5 million in restitution. The domestic abuse charges will result in a 3-year concurrent sentence. Upon your release, you will be subject to a permanent restraining order, prohibiting you from contacting Jessica Hastings or your children. She turned to Jessica. Mrs. Hastings, in relation to your divorce, this court grants you full custody of your children. Mr. Hastings will pay substantial alimony and child support, totaling 60% of his assets and future income. The judge's gavel fell, and the courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters demanded statements, and Brad's family protested loudly. Amid the commotion, Jessica flung her arms around me. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank you for believing me. I hugged her back, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders. You did it, Jessica. You were brave enough to confront him. As the bailiffs escorted Brad away, I caught his eye. His defeated expression was almost pitiful. I approached him, ignoring the protests of his lawyer. You did this to yourself, Brad, I said quietly. I simply exposed the truth. He glared at me but said nothing as he was led out. Ethan clapped my back. We did it, partner. Justice was served. But the victory was bittersweet. As we exited the courthouse, I saw Emily standing by the stairs. She looked small and lost, a far cry from the confident woman I had married. Ryan, she called out hesitantly. Can we speak? I sighed and motioned for Ethan and Jessica to go on without me. What is it, Emily? She wrung her hands nervously. I wanted to apologize for everything. What I did was unforgivable. You're right, I said flatly. It was. Tears streamed down her face. I understand, but I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. What I did with Brad was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but it was overshadowed by the memories of her betrayal. I'm sorry, Emily, but this doesn't change anything. Our divorce is finalized. It's over. She nodded and wiped her eyes. I understand. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I watched her walk away, feeling as though a chapter of my life had come to an end. It hurt, but it was also liberating. The next few weeks were hectic. My divorce from Emily was finalized, and according to the judge's ruling, she received half of everything. The media coverage of Brad's trial made finding work in Austin nearly impossible. Every potential employer recognized me as the guy from the viral video. One night, as I sat in my half-empty apartment, surrounded by moving boxes, Ethan came by with a 6-pack of beer. So, what's next for you? He asked, passing me a bottle. I shrugged. I honestly have no idea. There's nothing left for me here. Ethan took a long swig from his beer. You know, I have a buddy in Denver who runs a tech startup. They're always looking for good engineers. I raised an eyebrow. Denver? Why not? A fresh start in a new city might be exactly what you need. For the first time in months, I had a glimmer of hope. As I reflected on it, I said, you know what? Maybe you're right. Ethan grinned. Of course I'm right. I'm always right. It's why I'm such an effective lawyer. I laughed and threw a crumpled napkin at him. And so humble too. As we clinked our bottles together, I realized that despite everything, I had gained something valuable through this ordeal. A renewed friendship. The Rocky Mountains loomed large on the horizon as I drove into Denver, my car packed with the remnants of my life in Austin. The air felt different here, cleaner, somehow. Or maybe that was just my imagination, fueled by the promise of a new beginning. My first stop was the office of Mile High Tech, the startup Ethan's friend ran. The receptionist, a cheerful woman named Linda, greeted me warmly. You must be Ryan. Tom's expecting you. Go right in. Tom Reeves, the CEO, was a laid-back guy in his 40s with a quick smile and a firm handshake. Ryan, great to meet you in person. Ethan's told me a lot about you. I felt a flicker of anxiety. All good things, I hope. Tom laughed. Well, he mentioned you've had a rough go of it lately, but he also said you're one hell of an engineer. That's what I care about. As Tom showed me around the office, introducing me to the team, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Excitement. These people were passionate about their work, and their energy was contagious. So, Tom said as we returned to his office, what do you think? Want to join our merry band of misfits? I grinned. When can I start? The next few months flew by. I threw myself into my work, grateful for the chance to focus on coding rather than courtrooms. My coworkers were friendly and welcoming, never prying into my past. One Friday evening, as we were all heading out for the traditional end-of-week drinks, my team leader, Sarah, hung back. Hey Ryan, she said, falling into step beside me. A bunch of us are going hiking tomorrow. Want to join? I hesitated. I'd been keeping to myself outside of work, still wary of forming new connections. But Sarah's smile was warm and genuine. You know what? That sounds great, I found myself saying. The hike turned out to be just what I needed. As we climbed higher into the mountains, the fresh air and stunning views seemed to clear away the last lingering shadows of my old life. At the summit, as we sat catching our breath and passing around water bottles, Sarah nudged my shoulder. So, mysterious Ryan from Austin, what's your story? I tensed for a moment, then relaxed. These people had become more than just coworkers. Maybe it was time to open up a little. It's a long story, I warned. Sarah grinned. Well, it's a long way back down the mountain. We've got time. So I told them, not every detail, but enough. About Emily's betrayal, the viral video, the court case. As I spoke, I was surprised to find that the pain had dulled. It felt more like recounting something that had happened to someone else. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Sarah squeezed my arm. Damn, Ryan, that's rough. But you know what? You came out the other side. That's something to be proud of. The others murmured in agreement, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun overhead. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. After several months, life returned to normal. I had found an apartment with a view of the mountains, joined a local rock climbing gym, and even began dating again, casually. Then, one morning, I got a letter with an Austin postmark. When I saw Jessica's name on the return address, my heart skipped a beat, and my hand shook slightly as I opened it. Dear Ryan, I hope you're well. I've been wanting to write for a while, but I wanted to wait until I had some good news to share. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you again for everything you've done for me and my children. Your bravery in coming forward gave me the strength to advocate for myself. I can never repay you for that. I'm writing to let you know that we are doing well. The kids and I relocated to a new town where no one knows our history. I started my own small bakery. It's not much, but it's mine. And for the first time in years, I truly feel free. Brad is still in prison. I've heard he's up for parole soon, but with the restraining order in place, I'm not concerned. We're safe. Happy. Ryan, I hope you found peace and happiness too. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Thank you for everything, Jessica. As I finished reading, I realized I was smiling. Despite the pain and turmoil, something good had emerged from this mess. Jessica and her children were safe and happy, and I was creating a new life, one day at a time. I sat down at my desk and began writing a response. Dear Jessica, I can't express how pleased I was to receive your letter. As I wrote, I felt the last traces of my old life slipping away. Bitterness, anger, and regret. They all seemed to belong to a different person now. I looked out of my window at the mountains, their peaks shining in the morning sun. My new life awaited, full of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace them. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.